The ocean was angry that morning. Merrick Hale's lungs screamed for air as another wave crashed over his head, forcing salt water down his throat. His arms, usually so strong from his morning workouts, felt like dead weight as he fought against the current. The riptide had grabbed him like an invisible hand, dragging him further from shore with each desperate stroke. "This is how I die," he thought, his vision blurring. Not in a boardroom, not from stress, but here, alone in the water. His legs kicked frantically, but the ocean didn't care that he was worth $2.8 billion. It didn't care that he had 3 meetings scheduled for that afternoon, or that his company's latest app had just hit 10 million downloads. The water pulled him under again, and this time, his body barely fought back. The cold was everywhere now, in his bones, in his chest. His expensive waterproof watch, the one that could track his heart rate and GPS location, was useless against the primal force of nature. Another wave slammed into him, spinning him like a rag doll. He couldn't tell which way was up anymore. His mouth opened in a silent scream underwater, bubbles escaping as his last bit of air abandoned him. The morning sun above looked like a distant dream through the churning water. His limbs stopped responding to his commands. The panic that had consumed him moments ago was fading into something worse. Acceptance. "Please," was his last coherent thought before the darkness started creeping in from the edges of his vision. Not yet. Not like this. Nadia Reyes had been watching the water for 20 years, and she knew when something was wrong. She'd been setting up buoy markers for her afternoon swimming class, the routine as familiar as breathing. But movement in her peripheral vision made her pause. A swimmer, about 200 yards out, had stopped making forward progress. His strokes had shifted from smooth and confident to choppy and desperate. Then his head went under and didn't come back up. Her body moved before her mind finished processing. She dropped the marker, kicked off her sandals, and dove into the surf. Her instructor's whistle bounced against her chest as she cut through the water with powerful, efficient strokes. "Hold on," she whispered between breaths, though she knew he couldn't hear her. The distance closed slowly, too slowly. She saw him surface once more, his face a mask of terror, before another wave swallowed him whole. Nadia pushed harder, her muscles burning with the effort. She'd pulled dozens of people from these waters over the years, but something about this rescue felt different. Maybe it was the way he'd been swimming before, so confident, so sure of himself. The ocean had a way of humbling everyone eventually. When she finally reached him, he was floating face down, unconscious. No time for gentle approaches. She flipped him over, locked her arm across his chest, and began the long swim back to shore. What would you do if you saved someone's life and discovered they were worth billions? Would you stay for the reward, or disappear without a trace? The question hung in the air as Nadia dragged the unconscious man onto the beach. His designer wetsuit, the kind that cost more than most people's rent, clung to his athletic frame. The watch on his wrist, she recognized it from a magazine she'd seen at the dentist's office. It was worth more than her car, but none of that mattered, right now. She pressed her fingers to his neck, found a pulse, weak but there. His lips had turned blue, and his chest wasn't moving. Without hesitation, she tilted his head back, pinched his nose, and breathed life back into his lungs. Once, twice. On the third breath, he coughed violently, seawater spewing from his mouth as his body fought its way back to consciousness. She rolled him onto his side, rubbing his back as he retched and gasped. "That's it," she murmured. "Get it all out. You're safe now." His eyes fluttered open, green like sea glass, unfocused and confused. They locked onto her face for just a moment before rolling back. He was out again but breathing. In the distance she heard sirens. The surfer she'd called to must have radioed for help. She glanced at her waterproof watch. 7:23 a.m. The school bus arrived at 7:45. Rena needed her anxiety medication before school, and she'd promised to braid her sister's hair for picture day. The paramedics were maybe 3 minutes out. The man's breathing had stabilized. His color was returning. She'd done what she could do. Nadia made her choice. Welcome back to Rich Billionaires Romance Stories, where we share tales of love that prove money can't buy the most precious things in life. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button now because today's story will restore your faith in true love. But before we continue with what happened next on that beach, let me tell you something about choices. Every day, we make thousands of them. Most don't matter. But sometimes, a single decision in a single moment can change everything. Nadia didn't know that the man she'd just saved was Merrick Hale, tech billionaire and CEO of one of the fastest-growing companies in Silicon Valley. She didn't know that his face graced the covers of business magazines, or that his dating life was tabloid fodder. All she knew was that a human being had needed help, and she'd been in the right place at the right time. Or maybe it was the wrong time, depending on how you look at it, because while reporters would later call her disappearance mysterious, even suspicious, the truth was much simpler. Nadia had a life that needed her attention. A 13-year-old sister who struggled with anxiety, 2 jobs that barely covered their rent, a carefully built existence that avoided spotlights and scrutiny for very good reasons. So she left. She wrapped her beach towel around the stranger's shoulders, made sure the lifeguard had eyes on him, and jogged up the wooden stairs to the parking lot. No heroic photos, no grateful handshake, no exchange of names, just a woman who saved a life and went on with her day. This is the story of how one woman's selfless act led to a love story that would challenge everything both of them believed about wealth, privacy, and true connection. Because here's what Nadia didn't know. As she drove away from that beach, Merrick Hale didn't become a billionaire by letting mysteries go unsolved. The woman who'd saved his life had given him more than just breath. She'd given him a puzzle. And for a man who'd built his fortune on finding solutions, her disappearance was the most intriguing problem he'd faced in years. What happens when someone who has everything meets someone who wants nothing from them? What happens when gratitude turns into curiosity, and curiosity transforms into something deeper? Over the next few months, their paths would cross in ways neither of them expected. There would be coffee at sunrise, walks along the cliffs, and conversations that peeled back layers they'd both thought were permanently sealed. There would be challenges, too. Reporters with long lenses, family responsibilities that couldn't be ignored, and the vast gulf between a billionaire's world and a swimming instructor's reality. But most importantly, there would be a choice, made again and again, to show up for each other, without fanfare or expectation. To build something real in a world full of filters and facades. So settle in, friends, because this isn't your typical billionaire romance. This is the story of 2 people who discovered that the best things in life, trust, respect, and true partnership, can't be bought, sold, or captured in a headline. They can only be earned, one small moment at a time. And it all started with a woman who saved a drowning man and walked away before he could say thank you. The ocean had turned predator. Merrick's chest burned as he fought against the current that seemed determined to claim him. Each wave felt like a sledgehammer, driving him deeper beneath the surface. His lungs, already screaming for oxygen, filled with salt water that tasted like copper and fear. The expensive breathing techniques he'd learned in his executive wellness program were useless now. His body had forgotten everything except the primal need to survive. His legs cramped violently as he kicked against the invisible force dragging him seaward. The muscles in his shoulders, sculpted from years of gym sessions and rock climbing, betrayed him completely. Every stroke felt like moving through concrete. The water was so cold it felt like needles against his skin, even through the wetsuit that had cost him $800. How did this happen so fast? 20 minutes ago, he'd been cutting through the water with the confidence of someone who'd conquered. every challenge life had thrown at him. The early morning swim was supposed to clear his head before another brutal day of board meetings and investor calls. The ocean had looked so calm from the shore, so manageable. Now it was trying to kill him. Another wave crashed over his head, and this time he couldn't fight his way back to the surface fast enough. His vision darkened around the edges as his body tumbled in the washing machine of churning water. Up became down, left became right. The only constant was the burning in his chest and the terrible knowledge that he was running out of time. When he finally broke the surface, gasping and choking, he could barely see the shore. It looked impossibly far away, like something from a dream. His waterproof phone, sealed in its expensive case, might as well have been on Mars. No one knew where he was. No one was coming. The next wave hit him before he could take a full breath. Nadia's day had started at 5:30 a.m., same as always. She'd slipped out of the apartment quietly, careful not to wake Rena, who needed every minute of sleep she could get. 13 was a hard age under the best circumstances, but when you'd lost your mother 2 years ago and your sister was working 2 jobs to keep you afloat, sleep became precious currency. The drive to Seabright Cove took 12 minutes through empty streets. She knew because she'd timed it hundreds of times, calculating exactly how long she could spend at the beach before racing back to get Rena ready for school. Time was always the enemy, never enough of it, always running out when you needed it most. But these early morning hours belonged to her. She parked in the same spot every day, grabbed her equipment bag, and walked down to the water's edge. The ocean was different every morning, sometimes gentle and welcoming, other times moody and unpredictable. Today it looked deceptively calm, but Nadia had learned to read the subtle signs that most people missed. The way the waves broke just a little too close to shore, the cross-current forming near the kelp beds, the slight chop that suggested wind patterns shifting offshore. Respect the water, and it will respect you, she always told her students. Fight it, and it will win every time. She'd been teaching water safety for 6 years now, ever since she'd aged out of competitive swimming. The knee injury that ended her college scholarship had felt like the end of the world at 19. Now, at 28, she understood it had been a redirection, not a dead end. She'd saved more lives teaching nervous adults to float than she ever would have won medals. Her students ranged from 6-year-olds who giggled when they got their faces wet, to 70-year-olds who'd lived their entire lives afraid of deep water. Each one taught her something new about courage. Real bravery wasn't the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. As she set up the buoy markers for that afternoon's open water class, Nadia felt the familiar peace that came with routine. Check the tide charts, test the water temperature, scan for hazards, set the boundaries that would keep her students safe. That's when she saw him. The swimmer was in trouble. Nadia's trained eye caught the change in his stroke pattern immediately. What had been smooth and confident 30 seconds ago was now choppy and desperate. His head was staying up too long between strokes, a sure sign of panic. He was fighting the current instead of working with it, burning through his energy reserves at a dangerous rate. She dropped her equipment and ran toward the water, her mind already calculating angles and distances. The riptide had him in its grip about 200 yards out, pulling him parallel to the shore toward the rocky outcropping where the current would slam him against the rocks. "Hey!" she shouted to a surfer waiting for the next set. "Call the lifeguard tower. Swimmer in distress." The surfer nodded and reached for his radio as Nadia hit the water running. The cold shocked her system, but she pushed through it, her body remembering thousands of hours of training. She swam hard but smart, angling across the current instead of fighting it directly. The distance closed agonizingly slowly. She could see the swimmer's head going under for longer periods now, his movements becoming more erratic. By the time she reached him, he was barely conscious, his eyes rolled back and his lips blue with oxygen deprivation. "I've got you," she said firmly, though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "Stop fighting. Let me do the work." She slipped her arm across his chest in a classic rescue hold, feeling his body go limp against hers. He was heavier than she'd expected, solid muscle beneath the wetsuit, but she'd trained for this. The key was staying calm, reading the water, and using the current to help rather than hinder. The swim back to shore felt like it took forever. Twice, waves broke over both of them, and she had to adjust her grip to keep his head above water. Her shoulders burned with the effort, but she kept her breathing steady, her strokes efficient. Panic was contagious in the water. If she lost control, they'd both drown. When her feet finally touched sand, she didn't stop. She dragged him into the shallows and immediately checked his pulse. Weak but present. His breathing was shallow and irregular. She tilted his head back, pinched his nose, and gave him 2 rescue breaths. He coughed violently, seawater streaming from his mouth as his body fought to expel the ocean from his lungs. His eyes fluttered open for just a moment, confused, grateful, searching, before closing again. The world came back in fragments. First, the taste of salt and copper in his mouth. Then the feeling of sand beneath his back, rough and real. His chest felt like someone had filled it with broken glass, each breath a struggle against the weight pressing down on his lungs. There was a voice, calm, steady, female. "That's it. Get it all out. You're safe now." He tried to focus on the face above him, but his vision kept sliding in and out of focus. Dark hair escaping from a ponytail, brown eyes that looked at him with professional concern rather than recognition, hands that moved with practiced confidence, checking his pulse, adjusting his position. An angel. His oxygen-starved brain supplied helpfully. "I'm dead, and this is an angel." But angels probably didn't smell like coconut sunscreen and salt air. Angels probably didn't have calluses on their palms from years of hard work. This was real. He was alive. And this woman, this stranger, had pulled him back from the edge. He tried to speak, to say thank you, to ask her name, but his throat felt raw and swollen. Only a croak emerged. She leaned closer, and he caught a glimpse of a small scar on her chin, a sea glass bracelet on her wrist, the way she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating. "Don't try to talk," she said. "The paramedics are coming. You're going to be fine." Paramedics. The word cut through his confusion. That meant sirens. Sirens meant attention. Attention meant reporters, photographers, headlines he didn't want to see. His company's stock price would probably drop just from the speculation about his health. He tried to sit up, to tell her he didn't need an ambulance, but the world tilted sideways and darkness crept in from the edges of his vision. The last thing he saw was her face, etched with concern, before unconsciousness claimed him again. When he woke up properly, she was gone. Nadia's phone buzzed against her hip as she wrapped her beach towel around the unconscious man's shoulders. "Where are you?" "The bus comes in 20 minutes and I can't find my anxiety meds." Rena. Her heart clenched. Picture day. She'd promised to braid Rena's hair and help her pick out an outfit that would make her feel confident instead of self-conscious. More importantly, Rena's morning medication was hidden in the kitchen cabinet, a precaution they learned to take after a classmate had tried to steal pills from another student's backpack. The sirens were getting closer. Maybe 2 minutes out, the lifeguard from the tower was jogging down the beach with a rescue board. The man's breathing had stabilized, his color improving. She'd done what she could do, but Rena needed her too. Nadia looked down at the stranger one more time. His face was peaceful now, no longer twisted with panic and pain. He'd live. He'd probably never even remember her face clearly. In a few hours, this would just be a story he told at dinner parties. The time he almost drowned, and some local instructor pulled him out. She made her choice the same way she made all her choices, by asking herself, who needed her most right now? "Ain't on my way. Meds are behind the cereal boxes. You're going to look beautiful today, Nadia." She jogged up the wooden stairs to the parking lot, her wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to her skin. In the rearview mirror, She could see the ambulance pulling into the beach parking lot, paramedics already unloading their equipment. He'd be fine, he had to be. 20 minutes later, she was braiding Rena's hair in their tiny bathroom, listening to her sister chatter nervously about the history test she had in third period, and whether Jake Morrison would notice her new sweater. "You saved someone today, didn't you?" Rena said suddenly, meeting her eyes in the mirror. "What makes you say that? Your hair's still wet, and you have that look you get when you've done something important." Rena grinned. "Plus, you smell like the ocean more than usual." Nadia finished the braid and kissed the top of her sister's head. "Just doing my job, kiddo." But as she watched Rena board the school bus, backpack bouncing with each step, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd left something unfinished on that beach. Something that might come back to find her. The ambulance ceiling was white and sterile, nothing like the endless blue sky he'd been staring at when he thought he was going to die. "Easy there," a paramedic said as Merrick tried to sit up. "You took on a lot of water. We're taking you to Seabright General for observation." "I'm fine," Merrick croaked, though his throat felt like he'd been gargling with sandpaper. "I don't need a hospital. Sir, you nearly drowned. You were unconscious when we arrived. Protocol requires—" "Who pulled me out?" The question came out more urgently than he'd intended. "The woman who saved me. Is she okay?" The paramedic exchanged a glance with his partner, local swimming instructor, according to the lifeguard. "She was gone by the time we got there. Happens sometimes, people don't want to stick around for the paperwork." "Stunned. Go on." The word hit him harder than it should have. He'd been unconscious for maybe 10 minutes, and in that time, his rescuer had simply vanished. No name. No contact information. No way to thank her properly. "Did anyone get her name?" "Sorry, no. The lifeguard said she just wrapped you up, made sure you were breathing, and took off. Real professional about it." Merrick closed his eyes, trying to piece together the fragments of memory. Dark hair, steady hands, a voice that had cut through his panic like a lighthouse beam. The way she'd said "I've got you" with such quiet confidence that he'd actually believed her. At the hospital he submitted to the tests and observations with growing impatience. The doctors wanted to keep him overnight for monitoring, but he signed himself out against medical advice. He had meetings to attend, calls to return, a company to run. He couldn't afford to be seen as weak or unreliable. But as he sat in the back of a rideshare car heading to his rental house on the bluff, he couldn't stop thinking about the woman who'd saved his life and asked for nothing in return. In his world, everything came with a price tag, an agenda, a quid pro quo. Kindness without expectation was so rare he'd almost forgotten it existed. He pulled out his phone and started to type a search query, then stopped. He could find her in minutes if he wanted to. His company's facial recognition software, combined with local social media data, would identify her before lunch. But something held him back, the same instinct that told him she'd left for a reason. Instead, he opened his notes app and typed, "Find a way to say thank you. Respectfully." The Seabright Gazette was the kind of small-town newspaper that still printed wedding announcements and high school sports scores on the front page. Merrick had never placed a classified ad in his life, but he found himself on the phone with their advertising department 3 days after the rescue. "I'd like to place a personal ad," he told the woman who answered. Her voice had the patient tone of someone who'd fielded stranger requests. "What kind of personal ad, honey?" "A thank you message. To someone who helped me." "Oh, that's nice. We do those all the time. What would you like it to say?" Merrick stared at the legal pad where he'd written and crossed out a dozen different versions. "How do you thank someone for saving your life without sounding dramatic? How do you reach out without overstepping boundaries?" "To the woman who pulled me from the water at Seabright Cove Tuesday morning around 7 a.m. Thank you. If you'd like to meet for coffee so I can say it properly, I'll be at Captain's Diner this Saturday at 9 a.m., wearing a green scarf." "That's sweet," the woman said. "No name?" "No name. $50 for a week's run. We'll put it in the personnel section. $50. He'd spent more than that on lunch yesterday. but somehow this felt like the most important money he'd ever spent. Saturday morning found him at Captain's Diner, a green scarf draped over the back of his chair like a flag of surrender. The diner was exactly what he'd expected from a place called Captain's. Weathered wood, nautical decorations that had seen better decades, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The owner, a grizzled man who looked like he'd actually spent time at sea, poured him coffee without being asked. "You the one with the ad in the paper?" he asked. Guilty, figured. Don't get many folks in here wearing scarves in July. The man's eyes crinkled with amusement. She showed up yet? Not yet. Give it time. Good people around here, but they're careful. Don't like to rush into things. Merrick waited until 10:30, nursing 3 cups of coffee and watching every woman who walked through the door. None of them were her. He left disappointed but not surprised. If she'd wanted to be found, she wouldn't have disappeared in the first place. But he wasn't giving up. Not yet. If you believe true heroes don't stick around for the credit, smash that like button right now. And remember, Rich Billionaires Romance Stories uploads new tales of unexpected love every week. So hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Because here's what makes this story different from every other billionaire romance you've heard. Nadia didn't save Merrick because she knew who he was. She didn't stick around hoping for a reward. She didn't even give him her name. She saw someone in trouble, helped them, and went on with her life because that's what good people do. And Merrick? He could have used his resources to track her down in minutes. He could have hired private investigators, used facial recognition software, or leveraged his connections to find her. But he didn't. He placed a simple ad in a local newspaper and waited, because he understood that some things can't be forced. This is the foundation of real love, respect, patience, and the understanding that the best things in life come to those who honor boundaries instead of bulldozing through them. But don't think for a second that this story ends with a missed coffee date. Oh no, friends. What happens next will show you exactly why fate has a sense of humor, and why sometimes the universe conspires to bring 2 people together in the most unexpected ways. Merrick's search for his mystery rescuer is just beginning, and when they finally meet again, it won't be in some grand romantic gesture. It'll be in the most ordinary place, doing the most ordinary thing, proving that extraordinary love often grows in the soil of everyday moments. So if you're loving this journey of 2 souls finding each other across different worlds, make sure you're subscribed to Rich Billionaires Romance Stories, because what comes next will make your heart race and restore your faith in the power of genuine connection. Stay tuned, because the real story is just getting started. The rain drummed against Captain's Diner windows as Merrick sat alone at his corner table, the green scarf draped over the empty chair across from him. It was his 3rd Saturday morning waiting, and the disappointment was starting to feel familiar. "Mind if I sit?" Merrick looked up to find a weathered man in his 60s sliding into the booth without waiting for an answer. His jacket smelled like salt air and fish bait, and his hands bore the kind of scars that came from decades of working with ropes and hooks. Everything about him suggested he belonged to the sea. "I'm Boone," the man said, signaling the captain for coffee. "And you're the fellow with the newspaper ad. How did you—" "Small town. Word travels faster than gossip at a church social." Boone's eyes were the color of storm clouds, sharp and knowing. "Saw your rescue the other morning. Hell of a thing, watching someone pull a stranger from the drink." Merrick's pulse quickened. "You saw her? The woman who saved me?" "I did." Boone accepted his coffee with a nod of thanks. "Been fishing these waters for 40 years. Seen plenty of rescues, but that one was different. She moved like the ocean was her dance partner, not her enemy." "Do you know her name?" Boone studied him over the rim of his mug, taking his time with the answer. "I might, but if she didn't tell you herself, she had her reasons. The question is, what kind of man are you? The kind who respects those reasons, or the kind who bulldozes through them?" The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Merrick felt like he was being tested, though he wasn't sure what the right answer was supposed to be. "I just want to thank her properly," Merrick said. "She saved my life and disappeared before I could even learn her name." "Gratitude's a fine thing," Boone agreed, "but it can turn possessive, real quick, if you're not careful. You want to find her to say thank you, or because you can't stand having a mystery you can't solve?" The question hit closer to home than Merrick cared to admit. He was used to having answers, to being able to research and analyze until every unknown became known. The idea that someone could slip through his fingers so completely was unsettling. "Both, maybe," he admitted. Boone's weathered face cracked into something that might have been approval. "Honest answer. I respect that." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You want a chance at your thank you? Go to the community center Tuesday afternoon. They run water safety classes. The one you're looking for? She's the one who fixes broken things and doesn't wave when you thank her. Will you tell me her name?" "Nope," Boone stood, dropping a $5 bill on the table. "But I'll give you some free advice. Skip the cameras, skip the grand gestures, and for the love of all that's holy, don't show up throwing money around. Nobody here wants to be a story on your social media feed." "I don't have social media," Merrick said quietly. "Smart man." Boone paused at the edge of the booth. "And buy a raffle ticket for the youth swim program while you're there. Those kids need new equipment more than you need answers." Back in his rental house, Merrick stared at his laptop screen for 20 minutes without typing a single word. The cursor blinked in the search bar of his company's most powerful database. The same system that could identify a person from a single photograph, cross-reference their social media presence, and build a complete digital profile in under 60 seconds. He'd used it to vet potential employees, investigate competitors, and track down leads that had seemed impossible to find. All he needed was one clear image of her face, and he'd have her name, address, employment history, and probably her coffee order within the hour. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He could justify it easily enough. He was trying to thank someone who'd saved his life. Surely that was reasonable. Surely she'd understand. But Boone's words echoed in his mind. "What kind of man are you?" Merrick closed the laptop. He'd built his fortune on information, collecting it, analyzing it, monetizing it. In his world, knowledge was power, and power was everything. But sitting in this quiet house overlooking the ocean, he realized there was something deeply unsettling about the idea of using his resources to track down someone who'd chosen to remain anonymous. She'd saved his life and asked for nothing in return. The least he could do was respect her privacy. Instead, he opened his phone and searched for the Seabright Community Center. Their website was basic, clearly built by volunteers with more heart than technical skill. The water safety program had its own page, featuring photos of smiling children in life jackets and adults learning to float. The instructor's face was carefully cropped out of every shot. Interesting, he thought. Someone who doesn't want to be photographed. The class schedule showed open water sessions on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, adult beginner classes on Wednesday evenings, a weekend program for children with special needs. He could show up, not to ambush her, but to see if Boone was right, to understand what kind of person she was beyond those few minutes on the beach. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant, and the board meeting moved to Thursday. "Need you back in the city by Wednesday." Merrick stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "On reschedule. I'll be back on Friday." For the first time in his career, he was choosing personal time over business obligations. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the first deep breath he'd taken in months. The Seabright Community Center looked like it had been built in the 1970s and maintained through sheer force of will ever since. The pool area smelled like chlorine and determination, with hand-painted lane markers and diving blocks that had seen better decades. But the energy was infectious. Children shrieked with delight as they practiced their kicks, holding on to foam noodles like tiny life preservers. Parents cheered from the bleachers, phones out to capture every small victory. In the shallow end, a group of senior citizens moved through water aerobics with the focused intensity of Olympic athletes. And orchestrating it all was the woman from the beach. Merrick recognized her immediately, even though she was fully clothed and dry. The same dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The same calm confidence as she moved between students, adjusting form, offering encouragement, preventing small disasters before they could become big ones. "Breathe out underwater, Emma," she called to a girl who couldn't have been more than 7. "The bubbles are your friends, remember?" Emma nodded seriously and tried again, her face scrunched in concentration. When she managed 3 seconds underwater, the instructor's smile was radiant. "Perfect. You're a natural mermaid." Merrick found himself smiling too. There was something magnetic about watching someone who was genuinely good at their job, not just technically skilled, but passionate about it. She moved through the water like she belonged there, demonstrating strokes with fluid grace, spotting nervous swimmers with the vigilance of a guardian angel. "Are you thinking about signing up?" Merrick turned to find a teenage volunteer with a clipboard and a friendly grin. Her name tag read, "Rena." "Maybe," he said. "I'm not much of a swimmer." "Coach Nadia's the best," Rena said with obvious pride. "She taught my friend Marcus, and he was terrified of water deeper than a bathtub. Now he's on the high school swim team." "Nadia." Finally a name to go with the face. "She seems dedicated," Merrick observed. "She's amazing. She volunteers here even though she works 2 other jobs. Says everyone deserves to feel safe in the water." Rena's expression grew more serious. "Plus, she saved some guy's life last week. Pulled him right out of a riptide." Merrick's heart skipped. "Really?" "Yeah, but she won't talk about it. That's Coach Nadia for you. Does good things and doesn't want credit." Rena glanced at her clipboard. "Adult beginner class starts next week if you're interested. Fair warning though, she'll work you hard but you'll thank her for it later." "I'll think about it," Merrick said, though his mind was already made up. As he watched Nadia guide a nervous adult through his first attempt at floating, Merrick began to understand why she'd left the beach so quickly. This wasn't someone who craved attention or recognition. This was someone who found purpose in quiet service, in making other people's lives a little bit safer, a little bit better. The realization made his chest tight with something he couldn't quite name. "We can always use extra hands," the center director said, when Merrick showed up the following Tuesday with an offer to volunteer. "Especially someone willing to help with equipment maintenance." Merrick had introduced himself simply as Rick. Not technically a lie, just an abbreviation. He'd traded his usual designer clothes for jeans and a plain t-shirt, hoping to blend into the background. The last thing he wanted was to disrupt the careful ecosystem Nadia had built here. His first job was cleaning the equipment storage room, a task that apparently no one else wanted to tackle. As he sorted through kickboards and pool noodles, he could hear Nadia's voice echoing from the pool area. "Remember, panic is the enemy. The water isn't trying to hurt you, it's just being water. Work with it, not against it." The same philosophy she'd used to save his life. Over the next few weeks, Merrick found excuses to volunteer whenever Nadia was teaching. He fixed the broken door hinge that had been sticking for months. He organized the supply closet with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years optimizing systems. He even helped with the weekend cleanup, scrubbing pool tiles with the same focus he usually reserved for quarterly reports. And he watched. He watched Nadia coax a terrified 6-year-old into putting his face underwater for the first time. He watched her stay late to work one-on-one with a teenager who'd nearly drowned the previous summer and was fighting to overcome his fear. He watched her quietly pay for a student's swim goggles when his family couldn't afford them, pretending it was a program scholarship to preserve his dignity. She was extraordinary in the most ordinary ways. "You're new," she said one afternoon, appearing beside him as he restacked lane dividers. Merrick's heart hammered against his ribs. Up close, her eyes were even more striking, brown with flecks of gold like sunlight on deep water. Started a few weeks ago, he managed. I'm Rick, Nadia. She studied his face with the same careful attention she gave everything else. You're good with the equipment. Very thorough. I like things organized. I noticed. There was amusement in her voice. The supply closet hasn't looked that good since we opened. Where'd you learn to be so systematic? Years of running a tech company, he thought. Optimizing processes and managing complex systems. Just how my brain works, I guess, he said instead. She nodded, accepting the non-answer with grace. Well, we appreciate the help. The kids have been asking about the nice man who fixed the diving board. It was just a loose bolt. To you, maybe. To them, you're a hero. She smiled, and Merrick felt something shift in his chest. Heroes come in all shapes and sizes around here. Before he could respond, a splash from the pool demanded her attention. A beginning swimmer had gotten disoriented and was starting to panic. Nadia was in the water before Merrick could blink, her voice calm and reassuring as she guided the man back to the wall. You're okay, David. Breathe with me. In through your nose, out through your mouth. That's it. Watching her work was like watching an artist paint. Every movement had purpose. Every word was chosen for maximum impact. She didn't just teach swimming. She taught confidence, courage, the belief that you could overcome your fears if you had the right support. Merrick understood why she'd left the beach that morning. This was her calling, her mission. She didn't save people for recognition or reward. She saved them because that's who she was. It happened on a Thursday evening, 3 weeks into his volunteer stint. Merrick had stayed late to help close up the facility, a routine that had become comfortable and familiar. The pool area was quiet now, the last echoes of children's laughter fading into memory. He was stacking the final set of kickboards when he realized he'd left his jacket in the volunteer break room. The green scarf was draped over the back of a chair where he'd forgotten it. The same scarf he'd worn to Captain's Diner all those Saturday mornings, hoping against hope that his mystery rescuer would appear. That's a beautiful scarf. Merrick spun around to find Nadia standing in the doorway, her equipment bag slung over her shoulder. Her eyes were fixed on the green fabric with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you, he said carefully. It's sentimental. She stepped closer, and he saw the exact moment recognition dawned in her eyes. Her face went very still, very careful, like someone who just realized they were standing on thin ice. You're him, she said quietly. The swimmer from the beach. There was no point in denying it. Yes. How long have you known? Since the first day I volunteered here. He kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. I've been trying to figure out how to thank you without making you uncomfortable. Nadia set down her bag and crossed her arms. Not defensively, but like someone buying herself time to think. So you decided to, what, infiltrate my workplace? I decided to volunteer at a community center that does good work, he said honestly. The fact that you teach here was a bonus. A bonus. She repeated the words like she was testing their weight. Do you know how many people have tried to find me since that story hit the local news? Reporters, bloggers, people with cameras who think my life is their entertainment? Merrick's stomach dropped. I didn't know there was a story, small item in the Gazette. Local instructor assists swimmers in distress. No names, thank God, but enough details that people started asking questions. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the frustration underneath. I've been looking over my shoulder for weeks. I'm sorry. I never wanted to add to that stress. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. You could have found me in minutes, couldn't you? With your resources? The question surprised him with its directness. Yes. But you didn't? No, why not? Merrick chose his words carefully. Because you left the beach for a reason. Because you've been careful to stay out of photos here. Because someone who values their privacy that much deserves to have it respected. Something in her posture softened slightly. Most people wouldn't see it that way. I'm not most people. No, she agreed quietly. You're not. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and careful calculations. Finally, Nadia sighed and walked over to the ancient vending machine that had been dispensing lukewarm sodas since the Clinton administration. "You want a Coke?" she asked, feeding quarters into the slot. "Fair warning, this thing has a 50-50 success rate." "Sure." She pressed the button and waited. Nothing happened. She tried again, then gave the machine a practiced kick to the side. 2 cans tumbled down with a satisfying drink. "Trick is knowing exactly where to hit it," she said, handing him one of the cans. "It took me 6 months to figure out the sweet spot." They sat on the bench across from the machine, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. Merrick popped open his Coke and took a sip, buying time to organize his thoughts. "I owe you my life," he said finally. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would do." "That's not true, and you know it." He turned to face her. "Most people would have called for help and waited. You didn't hesitate. You just acted." Nadia shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm trained for water rescue. It's what I do." "It's who you are," he corrected gently. "I've been watching you teach for weeks. You don't just save people from drowning, you save them from fear, from giving up on themselves." That 6-year-old who was terrified of putting his face underwater? He's doing cannonballs off the diving board now. The teenager who almost quit after his panic attack? He's helping with the beginner classes. That's just good teaching. No, that's something more. Merrick set down his Coke and leaned forward slightly. You see potential in people that they can't see in themselves. You make them believe they're capable of more than they thought possible. Nadia was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on the condensation of her can. My mom used to say that everyone's drowning in something. Sometimes it's water, sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's just life. She said the best thing you can do is throw someone a rope and teach them how to swim to shore. She sounds wise. Nadia's voice grew softer. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. That's when I started working here full-time instead of just weekends. I'm sorry. She would have liked this place. She believed in helping people without making a big deal about it. Nadia glanced at him sideways. She also would have been suspicious of a billionaire who shows up pretending to be a volunteer. Merrick nearly choked on his Coke. How did you? Small town, remember? Plus, that watch you wear costs more than most people's cars. And you organize supply closets like someone who's used to managing complex systems. She smiled slightly. Also, Boone told me. Boone? He's been keeping an eye on you, making sure you weren't some creep with ulterior motives. Her expression grew more serious. Do you have ulterior motives? The question hung between them like a challenge. Merrick could feel the weight of the moment, the sense that his answer would determine everything that came next. I wanted to thank you, he said honestly, and then I wanted to understand you, and now, he paused, searching for the right words. Now I just want to know if you'd let me buy you coffee sometime, not as a billionaire trying to repay a debt, but as someone who thinks you're remarkable and would like the chance to know you better. Nadia was quiet for so long that Merrick began to wonder if he'd overstepped. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully measured. I have a lot of responsibilities, she said. A sister to take care of, 2 jobs, classes to teach. I don't have time for something complicated. I'm not asking for something complicated. I'm asking for coffee. Coffee with a billionaire is automatically complicated. Coffee with Rick, the volunteer, doesn't have to be. She laughed despite herself. Is that what we're calling you now? Rick the volunteer? If it makes you more comfortable, yes. Nadia studied his face, and Merrick had the distinct feeling he was being evaluated according to criteria he didn't fully understand. Finally she nodded. Okay, but I have conditions. Name them. No cameras, no reporters, no showing up in a car that costs more than my apartment. She held up a finger for each point. And if you're late, I'm gone. I don't wait around for anyone, billionaire or not. Fair enough. When and where? Captain's Diner, Sunday morning, 6 a.m. Merrick blinked. 6 a.m.? I work the breakfast shift at the cafe afterward, and I like to watch the sunrise before the day gets crazy. If that's too early for you. No, it's perfect, he said quickly. 6 a.m. it is. Good. She stood and shouldered her bag. And Rick? Yeah? Don't overthink it, it's just coffee. But as Merrick watched her walk away, he knew it was anything but just coffee. This was a chance, maybe his only chance, to show her that he was more than his bank account, more than the headlines and assumptions that followed him everywhere. He had 4 days to figure out how to be worthy of her trust. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the most important challenge he'd ever faced. As Merrick drove home that night, he couldn't stop thinking about the choice he'd made weeks ago, to close his laptop instead of using his resources to track down Nadia. At the time it had felt like the right thing to do, but he hadn't fully understood why. Now he did. In a world where everything was available instantly, information, entertainment, even relationships, the idea of waiting, of earning something slowly, had become almost revolutionary. His entire industry was built on the premise that faster was better, that immediate access was the ultimate goal. But watching Nadia work with her students had taught him something different. The 6-year-old who was now doing cannonballs hadn't gotten there overnight. It had taken weeks of patient encouragement, small victories, and gentle pushes outside his comfort zone. The teenager helping with beginner classes had needed months to rebuild his confidence after his near-drowning experience. Real growth, real trust, real connection. These things couldn't be rushed or hacked or optimized. They required time, consistency, and the willingness to show up even when progress felt impossibly slow. Merrick had spent his career solving problems with technology, finding ways to make everything faster and more efficient. But some things, the most important things, couldn't be solved with an algorithm or a database search. They could only be earned through respect, patience, and the radical act of putting someone else's comfort before your own curiosity. As he pulled into his driveway, Merrick realized that Nadia had already given him something more valuable than the rescue itself. She'd reminded him what it felt like to want something he couldn't simply buy or command or optimize his way into having. She'd reminded him what it felt like to hope. Sunday morning couldn't come fast enough. Captain's Diner at 6 in the morning was a different world entirely. The breakfast rush wouldn't start for another hour, leaving the place quiet except for the gentle clatter of dishes and the soft murmur of early risers nursing their first cups of coffee. Merrick arrived 5 minutes early, choosing the same corner booth where he'd waited with his green scarf all those weeks ago. This time, he wasn't waiting long. Nadia pushed through the door at exactly 6 a.m., her hair still damp from what he assumed was an early morning swim. She wore jeans and a simple blue sweater that brought out the gold flecks in her eyes, and when she spotted him, her smile was cautious, but genuine. "You made it," she said, sliding into the booth across from him. "Did you think I wouldn't? I thought there was a 50-50 chance you'd realize that 6 a.m. on a Sunday is insane and decide to sleep in instead." The captain appeared with coffee before either of them could ask, setting down 2 steaming mugs with the efficiency of someone who'd been doing this for decades. "Morning, Nadia," he said gruffly. "Yours, please. And whatever he's having is on me." "That's not necessary," Merrick started. "My invitation, my treat," Nadia said firmly. "Besides, you've been volunteering at the center for weeks without pay. Consider it a thank you." The captain looked between them with obvious curiosity but didn't comment. "Pancakes and bacon for the lady and for you?" "Same, please," Merrick said, though he couldn't remember the last time he'd eaten pancakes for breakfast. When they were alone again, Nadia wrapped her hands around her coffee mug and studied him over the rim. "So, Rick the volunteer, tell me something real about yourself. What do you want to know? Start with why you were swimming alone at 7 in the morning. Most people your age are either still asleep or hitting the gym." Merrick considered how much truth to share. I couldn't sleep. Too much noise in my head. The ocean seemed like a good place to clear it. What kind of noise? Work stuff. Decisions that affect a lot of people. The weight of expectations. He paused, surprised by his own honesty. I used to think success meant having all the answers. Lately, I'm not sure I even know the right questions. Nadia nodded slowly. My mom used to say that the smartest people are the ones who admit when they're lost. Take courage to say you don't know something. Your mom sounds like she was full of wisdom. She was a waitress at a truck stop for 20 years. Saw every kind of person you can imagine. Rich, poor, happy, broken, everything in between. She said it taught her that everyone's fighting battles you can't see. Nadia's voice grew softer. She would have liked you, I think. Why? Because you're here at 6 a.m. having pancakes instead of sending an assistant with a check and a thank you note. Their food arrived and they ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Merrick found himself watching the way Nadia cut her pancakes into precise squares, the way she listened to conversations at other tables without being obvious about it, the way she smiled when the captain refilled their coffee without being asked. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Shoot, why did you leave the beach that morning? Really?" Nadia set down her fork and considered the question. "Because I had somewhere else to be. Someone else who needed me. Your sister. You've done your homework. Rena mentioned you when I first visited the center. She's proud of you. She's the best thing in my life," Nadia said simply. "When Mom got sick, I promised I'd take care of her. That means being there for the small stuff, not just the big emergencies." "Picture day," Merrick said, remembering what he'd overheard that morning at the beach. "Picture day," she confirmed. "Anxiety medication, hair braiding, and a pep talk about how Jake Morrison would definitely notice her new sweater. Did he? He asked her to be his lab partner in chemistry. She's been floating on air ever since." Merrick found himself smiling. "You're a good sister." "I try to be. She deserves someone who shows up consistently, not just when it's convenient." The words carried weight beyond their surface meaning, and Merrick understood he was being told something important about Nadia's values, her priorities, her non-negotiables. "Consistency is underrated," he agreed. "Most people think grand gestures are more romantic. Flowers, expensive dinners, surprise trips to Paris." Nadia shrugged. "But I think love is more like showing up with soup when someone's sick, remembering they have a big presentation and texting good luck, being the person they can count on when everything else feels uncertain." That's a beautiful way to think about it. It's the only way I know how to think about it. After breakfast, they walked the coastal trail that wound along the bluffs overlooking the ocean. The morning fog was just beginning to lift, revealing glimpses of the water below. Seagulls wheeled overhead, their cries mixing with the distant sound of waves against rocks. "This is my favorite time of day," Nadia said, breathing deeply. "Before the world gets complicated." "It's beautiful," Merrick agreed, though he found himself watching her more than the scenery. "Do you come here often?" "Every Sunday morning when I can. It's where I do my thinking." She glanced at him sideways. "What about you? Where do you go when you need to think?" "Usually my office. Sometimes the roof of my building." He paused. "This is better." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the path winding between wind-sculpted trees and patches of wild grass. When they reached a weathered bench overlooking the water, Nadia sat down and patted the space beside her. "Your turn," she said. "Tell me something real about your past." Merrick settled beside her, close enough to catch the scent of her shampoo, something clean and simple that reminded him of rain. "What do you want to know?" "Start with why you became what you became." "The tech thing. I was the kid who took apart radios to see how they worked. Drove my parents crazy because I'd forget to put them back together." He smiled at the memory. "I got my first computer when I was 12, and it was like finding a language I'd been waiting my whole life to speak." "Were you one of those kids who was coding in their basement while everyone else was playing sports?" "Guilty. Though I played soccer too. My mom insisted on balance. His expression grew more serious. She died when I was in college. Car accident. Sudden, senseless. The kind of thing that makes you realize how fragile everything really is. I'm sorry. It changed everything for me. Made me understand that time isn't guaranteed, that if you want to build something meaningful, you can't wait for the perfect moment. He looked out at the water. I started my first company 6 months later. Dropped out of school, much to my father's horror. Did it work out? Eventually. But not the way I thought it would. Merrick was quiet for a moment. I thought success would feel different, more satisfying, I guess. Instead, it just felt like more pressure, more expectations, more people depending on decisions I wasn't sure I was qualified to make. Imposter syndrome? Maybe. Or maybe just the realization that money doesn't solve the problems that actually matter. He turned to look at her. What about you? Have you always wanted to teach swimming? Nadia laughed. God, no. I was going to be the next Katie Ledecky. Had my whole life planned out. College scholarship, Olympic trials, endorsement deals, the works. What happened? Knee injury my sophomore year. Torn ACL, damaged cartilage. The doctors said I could swim recreationally, but competitive swimming was over. She touched her knee absently. I was devastated. It felt like my entire identity had been ripped away. How did you get through it? Badly, at first. I was angry, bitter, convinced the universe had it out for me. She smiled ruefully. Then I started volunteering at the community center as part of my physical therapy, helping kids who were just learning to swim. And I realized something. What? Teaching someone to overcome their fear of water is just as rewarding as winning a race. Maybe more so because you're not just improving your own life, you're changing theirs. She looked out at the ocean. I found my purpose in a place I never expected to see. Do you ever regret it? The path not taken? Sometimes, but then I think about all the people I've helped, all the lives I've touched, and I realize this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. She glanced at him. What about you? Any regrets? Merrick considered the question seriously. I regret not taking more time to appreciate the journey. I was so focused on the destination that I missed a lot of beautiful moments along the way. Like what? Like this, he said quietly, sitting on a bench with someone who makes me remember why I used to love watching the sunrise. They were walking back toward town when Nadia's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and frowned. Everything okay? Merrick asked. Rena. She's supposed to be working on a science project, but she's procrastinating. Nadia typed a quick response. She has this marine robotics presentation next week, and she's convinced she's going to fail. Marine robotics? That's impressive for a 13-year-old. She's brilliant. Gets it from our mom. She was always building things, fixing things, figuring out how stuff worked. Nadia's pride was evident in her voice. But Rena gets overwhelmed sometimes. Perfectionist tendencies. Sounds familiar, Merrick said with a self-deprecating smile. The project is for a regional competition. If she places, she gets a scholarship to this amazing summer program at the Marine Science Institute. Nadia's phone buzzed again. But the entry fee is significant. And even if she wins, there are travel costs, equipment costs. She trailed off, and Merrick could see the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a familiar burden. How much? He asked gently. It doesn't matter. We'll figure it out. We always do. Nadia. I'm not asking for money, she said firmly. That's not why I'm telling you this. I know, but if there's a way I can help, there isn't. Her tone was kind but final. This is something we need to handle ourselves. Merrick wanted to argue, wanted to point out that he could solve this problem with a single phone call, but something in her expression stopped him. This wasn't about pride or stubbornness. It was about maintaining the independence she'd fought so hard to build. Tell me about the project, he said instead. Nadia's face lit up. She's designing an underwater drone that can detect plastic pollution and map its location. The idea is that cleanup crews could use the data to target their efforts more effectively. That's incredible. She came up with that herself? Completely. She's been obsessed with ocean conservation since she was little. Probably my fault. I've been dragging her to beach cleanups since she could walk. Can I meet her sometime? I'd love to hear about her project. Nadia studied his face carefully. Why? Because she's important to you. And because a kid who's designing pollution detection drones at 13 is someone I'd like to know. She's protective of me, Nadia warned, and suspicious of anyone who might hurt me. Good. She should be. She'll probably interrogate. I can handle a 13-year-old's interrogation. Famous last words, Nadia said with a grin. The following Tuesday, Merrick found himself back at the community center, but this time as an official student rather than a volunteer. He'd signed up for Nadia's intermediate swimming class, claiming he wanted to improve his technique. "You're sure about this?" Nadia asked as he stood at the edge of the pool in borrowed swim trunks. "You nearly drowned a month ago. That's exactly why I need to do this. I want to understand what happened, and how to prevent it from happening again." "Okay, but we start slow. No heroics, no trying to prove anything." For the next hour, Nadia guided him through the fundamentals he'd never properly learned. How to read the water's mood, how to recognize dangerous currents, how to escape a riptide without panicking. "The key is not to fight it," she explained, as they treaded water in the deep end. "A riptide is like a river within the ocean. If you try to swim directly against it, you'll exhaust yourself. Instead, you swim parallel to the shore until you're out of the current, then angle back to land, like taking a detour instead of hitting traffic head-on." Exactly. She demonstrated the technique, her movements fluid and confident. The ocean isn't your enemy, it's just following its own rules. Once you understand those rules, you can work with them instead of against them. Merrick tried to replicate her movements, feeling clumsy and uncoordinated compared to her natural grace. But Nadia was patient, adjusting his form with gentle touches, encouraging him when he got frustrated. "Better," she said as he completed a lap using the technique she'd taught him. "You're starting to feel it, aren't you? The rhythm?" He was. For the first time since the rescue, being in deep water didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a conversation he was finally learning to participate in. After class, as they were putting away equipment, Nadia mentioned that the pool's filtration system had been acting up. "The pump keeps shutting off randomly," she said. "We've had 3 different repair guys look at it, but nobody can figure out what's wrong. Mind if I take a look? You know about pool pumps? I know about systems that aren't working the way they're supposed to." 20 minutes later, Merrick emerged from the pump room with grease on his hands and a satisfied expression. "Loose connection in the electrical panel," he announced. The vibration from the pump was gradually working the wire free. "I should be fine now." Nadia stared at him. "How did you figure that out so fast when 3 professionals couldn't?" "Different perspective, maybe. Sometimes you need someone who doesn't know what's supposed to be impossible." "That's actually pretty profound. Don't give me too much credit. I just like solving puzzles." But as Nadia watched him wash the grease from his hands, she realized it was more than that. He approached problems with the same methodical patience she used in the water, breaking them down into manageable pieces, testing theories, adjusting his approach based on what he learned. They were more alike than she'd expected. Over the next few weeks, Merrick found himself becoming a regular fixture in Seabright. He helped with the Saturday morning beach cleanup, working alongside locals who gradually stopped treating him like an outsider. He fixed the community center's ancient coffee maker and installed new LED lights in the pool area. He even joined Boone for an early morning fishing trip, though he proved spectacularly bad at casting a line. "You're overthinking it," Boone said, as Merrick's hook landed in the kelp for the 3rd time. "Fishing isn't about precision, it's about patience." "I'm not very good at patience," I noticed. "But you're learning." The breakthrough came when Mrs. Chen, who ran the local hardware store, asked for his help with her computer. Her grandson had set up an online ordering system that she couldn't figure out, and she was losing customers to the big box store in the next town. Merrick spent an afternoon simplifying the interface, creating shortcuts for the most common tasks, and teaching Mrs. Chen how to navigate the system with confidence. "You're a lifesaver," she said, beaming as she successfully processed her first online order. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. Just promise me you'll call if you need help with anything else." Word spread quickly in a town the size of Seabright. Soon Merrick was fielding requests to help with everything from setting up social media accounts for local businesses to troubleshooting the community center's ancient sound system. "You're becoming quite the local celebrity," Nadia observed one evening as they walked along the beach. "Mrs. Patterson told me you helped her set up video calls with her grandchildren in Portland. It wasn't a big deal. Just showed her how to use the camera on her tablet. It was a big deal to her. She's been feeling isolated since her husband died last year." Nadia kicked at a piece of driftwood. "You're good at this, you know. Helping people without making them feel helpless. I'm learning from the best," he said, glancing at her meaningfully. "The town's starting to trust you. That's not something that happens overnight around here." "What about you?" he asked quietly. "Do you trust me?" Nadia was quiet for a long moment, watching the waves roll in. "I'm getting there." It wasn't a declaration of love, but it felt like something more valuable, the beginning of real partnership. The lighthouse at Seabright Point had been decommissioned for 20 years, but locals still maintained it as a landmark and gathering place. On clear evenings, couples would climb the winding path to watch the sunset from the observation deck. Merrick and Nadia had fallen into the habit of ending their walks there, sitting on the weathered bench that faced west toward the horizon. Tonight the sky was painted in shades of gold and coral, the kind of sunset that made you believe in magic. "Rena wants to meet you," Nadia said suddenly. "Really?" "Don't get too excited. She has a list of questions prepared. I think she's been researching interrogation techniques online." "What kind of questions?" "The kind designed to figure out if you're going to break my heart." Nadia's voice was light, but there was something vulnerable underneath. "She's protective." "She should be." "You're worth protecting." The words hung between them, heavier than he'd intended. Nadia turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face in the golden light. "Merrick, I know this is complicated," he said quickly. "I know I come with baggage and attention and a world that doesn't always make sense. But I need you to know that these past few weeks, they've been the most real I've felt in years." "Real how?" "Like I remember who I used to be before everything got so noisy, like I can breathe again." He reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "You make me want to be better, not richer or more successful, just better." Nadia's fingers intertwined with his, and he could feel the calluses from years of pool work, the strength that had pulled him from the ocean. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Of what? Of this? Of you? Of what happens when the novelty wears off and you remember that your real life is somewhere else? My real life is wherever you are." The words surprised them both with their intensity. Nadia's breath caught, and for a moment, the only sound was the distant crash of waves against the rocks below. "You can't just say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because it makes me want to believe you." "Then believe me." The space between them seemed to shrink without either of them moving. Merrick could see the gold flecks in her eyes, the way her lips parted slightly as she looked at him. The lighthouse beam swept across the water behind them, painting everything in brief, brilliant light. "Nadia," he said softly, and it was both a question and a prayer. She answered by closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something precious. But when she sighed against his mouth, and her free hand came up to cup his cheek, something shifted. The kiss deepened, became more certain, more real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Nadia rested her forehead against his. "That was she started. Yeah, he agreed, not needing her to finish. They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. The lighthouse beam continued its steady rotation, a rhythm as reliable as breathing. What happens now? She asked eventually. Now we take it one day at a time, no pressure, no expectations, just this. This is good, she said softly. This is perfect, he corrected, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Merrick felt like he was exactly where he belonged. This is why Rich Billionaires Romance Stories exist, to show you that real love grows in the quiet moments. If Merrick and Nadia's journey is touching your heart, comment true love below and tell us, what would you have done if you saved a billionaire? Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to believe in love again. Because what you're witnessing here isn't just a romance, it's a masterclass in how genuine connection actually develops. Notice how Merrick didn't try to buy Nadia's affection with expensive gifts or grand gestures. Instead, he showed up consistently, respected her boundaries, and proved his worth through actions, not words. And Nadia? She didn't fall for his money or status. She fell for the man who fixed pool pumps without being asked, who listened to her stories about her students, who understood that love isn't about what you can provide. It's about who you choose to be when nobody's watching. This is the kind of love story that restores your faith in human connection, the kind that proves money can't buy the things that truly matter: trust, respect, genuine partnership, and the courage to be vulnerable with another person. But friends, we're just getting to the good part, because every real love story faces tests. And Merrick and Nadia are about to discover that building something beautiful together is only half the battle. The other half is protecting it from a world that doesn't always understand the value of quiet, steady love. So if this story is speaking to your heart, if you believe in love that grows slowly and lasts forever, make sure you're subscribed to Rich Billionaires Romance Stories. Hit that notification bell, because what happens next will test everything Merrick and Nadia have built together and show you exactly what real love looks like when it's put to the ultimate test. The call came at 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jarring Merrick awake in his rental house overlooking the ocean. His assistant's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. The Singapore deal is falling apart, she said without preamble. Chen Industries is threatening to pull out unless you're on a plane by tonight. The board is meeting in an emergency session at noon, and Marcus is already positioning himself to take over the negotiations. Merrick sat up, running a hand through his hair as his mind shifted into crisis mode. The Singapore partnership was worth $200 million and 18 months of careful relationship building. Marcus Hoffman, his ambitious VP, had been circling like a shark for months, waiting for any sign of weakness. What's their specific concern? He asked, already reaching for his laptop. They're questioning your commitment to the company. There are rumors you've been distracted, spending time away from the office, missing key calls. Her voice carried a note of accusation. Merrick, where have you been? I've been covering for you, but people are starting to ask questions. Through his bedroom window, Merrick could see the community center in the distance, its pool lights glowing in the pre-dawn darkness. In 3 hours, Nadia would be there setting up for her morning classes, moving through the water with the same grace that had saved his life. Thank God. I'll have the car pick you up in an hour. After hanging up, Merrick stared at his phone for a long moment. He had Nadia's number now, but calling her at 6 in the morning to say goodbye felt wrong. She'd be getting ready for work, focused on her students, living the life she'd built without him. Instead, he typed a text. On emergency in the city. I have to leave today. I'll call you tonight. He hit send before he could second-guess himself, then began throwing clothes into a suitcase with mechanical efficiency. This was his world. Crisis management, emergency flights, decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars. So why did it feel like he was abandoning something infinitely more valuable? The Singapore crisis consumed 3 days of 18-hour meetings, conference calls that stretched past midnight, and the kind of high-stakes negotiations that had once thrilled him. Merrick managed to salvage the deal, but only by promising Chen Industries his personal attention for the next 6 months. He was finally heading back to Seabright when his phone exploded with notifications. The first was a text from Boone. "Oh, heads up. Reporters sniffing around town asking about you and Nadia." The second was a link to a gossip blog with the headline, "Tech Billionaires Secret Romance, Merrick Hale Spotted with Mystery Woman in Coastal Town." The photos were grainy but unmistakable. Him and Nadia walking the bluff trail, sitting at Captain's Diner, kissing at the lighthouse. Someone with a telephoto lens had been watching them, turning their private moments into public entertainment. Merrick's blood ran cold as he scrolled through the article. It was full of speculation and half-truths, describing Nadia as a local swimming instructor and questioning whether their relationship was affecting his business judgment. The comments section was worse. Strangers dissecting their body language, making crude jokes about billionaire slumming, speculating about Nadia's motives. By the time he reached Seabright, news vans were parked outside the community center. Reporters with microphones lurked near Captain's Diner. A photographer with a massive lens was stationed across from Nadia's apartment building. Merrick drove straight to the community center, his jaw clenched with fury. He found Nadia in the pool office, staring at her computer screen with the expression of someone watching their world collapse. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly. She looked up, and he saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before, fear mixed with anger and a deep, bone-deep exhaustion. "They know where I live," she said flatly, "where Rena goes to school. They've been calling the center all morning asking for interviews. One of them followed me to the grocery store and kept shouting questions about our relationship status. Nadia, I'm so sorry. Are you?" The question was sharp, cutting. "Because this is your world, isn't it? This is what happens when people get close to you. It doesn't have to be like this. I can make them stop." "How? By paying them off? By having your lawyers threaten them?" She stood up, pacing to the window where she could see reporters setting up equipment in the parking lot. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why I left the beach that morning." Nadia's hands were shaking as she pulled the blinds closed, blocking out the view of the media circus outside. Merrick had never seen her lose her composure before, and watching her struggle to maintain control made his chest tight with guilt. "I can't do this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't have strangers analyzing my life, following my sister, turning our relationship into content for their entertainment. We'll figure it out." "No." She turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You don't understand. When I was 19, a friend's wedding video went viral. I was just in the background, dancing, having fun. But people took screenshots, made memes, and turned me into a joke for 3 weeks. Strangers were commenting on my appearance, my dancing, making up stories about who I was." Merrick felt sick. "I didn't know. It was humiliating. I couldn't go anywhere without people recognizing me, pointing, whispering. I had to change my phone number, delete all my social media, and basically disappear until the internet moved on to the next target." Her voice grew stronger, more determined. "I swore I'd never put myself in that position again. This is different, is it? Because right now there are people online calling me a gold digger, speculating about whether I'm pregnant, debating whether I'm pretty enough to land a billionaire." She laughed bitterly. "They're treating me like a prize you won, not a person with my own life and choices." Merrick wanted to reach for her, to comfort her, but something in her posture warned him to keep his distance. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "I want you to make it stop. I want you to go back to your real life, and let me go back to mine." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back. "I want to teach my classes without reporters asking my students about our romance. I want Rena to go to school without photographers following her bus. You want me to leave? I want you to choose," she said, meeting his eyes directly. "Your world or mine, because they can't coexist, and I won't sacrifice my peace for anyone's spotlight." The storm hit Seabright 2 days later, as if nature itself was responding to the emotional turbulence that had engulfed the town. Rain lashed the windows of the community center, while wind howled through the parking lot, sending debris flying past the glass doors. Merrick had been staying away, giving Nadia the space she'd asked for while his lawyers worked to discourage the media attention. But when the power went out, and emergency services were overwhelmed, he couldn't stay away any longer. He found Nadia at the center, which had been designated as an emergency shelter. She was helping elderly residents who'd been evacuated from a nearby assisted living facility, her movements efficient despite the chaos around her. "The backup generator's not working," she said when she saw him, not bothering with pleasantries. "We've got 30 people here, including some who need medical equipment." "Where's the generator?" "Basement." "But it's flooded down there." Merrick was already rolling up his sleeves. "Show me." They worked together in the flooded basement, water up to their knees, using flashlights to examine the generator's electrical connections. The problem was obvious. Water had gotten into the control panel, shorting out the system. "Can you fix it?" Nadia asked, holding the light steady while he worked. "Maybe, but I need to isolate the damaged circuits first." He looked up at her. "This is going to take a while, and it's not safe down here with all this water." "I'm not leaving." "Nadia, these people are my responsibility. If you're staying, I'm staying." For the next 2 hours they worked side by side, troubleshooting electrical problems while water continued to seep in around them. Nadia proved to be an excellent assistant, anticipating what he needed, asking smart questions, never getting in his way. When the generator finally roared to life and the lights flickered back on, they were both soaked and exhausted. But upstairs, the cheers from the evacuees made every minute worthwhile. "You did it," Nadia said, and for the first time in days, she was looking at him without walls between them. "We did it," he corrected. That's when Rena appeared at the top of the basement stairs, her face tight with worry. "Nadia, the bridge on Maple Street is out, and there are people trapped on the other side. The fire department's asking for anyone with a boat." Merrick and Nadia exchanged a look. They both knew that stretch of water, treacherous in good weather, potentially deadly in a storm. "Boone's got a rescue boat," Nadia said. "But he'll need help operating it in these conditions." "I'll come with you," Merrick said immediately. "You don't know these waters." Rena looked between them, her 13-year-old mind clearly processing the dynamics at play. "Are you two going to keep fighting, or are you going to save some people?" Despite everything, Nadia almost smiled. "We're going to save some people." The rescue operation lasted 6 hours. By the time they'd evacuated the last family from the flooded neighborhood, Merrick's expensive clothes were ruined. His hands were raw from handling ropes, and he'd never felt more useful in his life. As they secured Boone's boat at the marina, Merrick's phone buzzed with yet another urgent message from his assistant. The board was demanding his immediate return. Marcus was making moves to consolidate power. Stock prices were fluctuating based on rumors about his erratic behavior. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then turned the phone off. "Important call?" Nadia asked, wringing water from her hair. "Not anymore." That night, alone in his rental house, Merrick made a decision that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. He called an emergency board meeting, not to defend his actions, but to announce his transition to a chairman role. "I'm bringing in Sarah Chen as CEO," he told the stunned board members via video conference. "She's been running our Asian operations flawlessly for 3 years, and she has the vision to take the company forward. Merrick, this is highly irregular, Marcus began. What's irregular is a CEO who's forgotten why he started the company in the first place, Merrick interrupted. I built this business to solve problems, to make people's lives better. Somewhere along the way, it became about stock prices and market share and beating the competition. And now? Asked Janet Morrison, the board's longest-serving member. Now I want to remember what success actually looks like, not just in quarterly reports, but in the impact we have on real people's lives. The transition wouldn't be immediate. There were legal requirements, shareholder approvals, a dozen complex processes to navigate. But for the first time in years, Merrick felt like he was moving towards something instead of just running faster on a treadmill. 3 weeks later, the media attention had finally died down. The reporters had moved on to other stories, the photographers had found new targets, and Seabright had returned to its normal rhythm of quiet days and peaceful evenings. Merrick found Nadia on the fire escape outside her apartment, sitting with a cup of tea and watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. She'd been avoiding him since the storm, processing everything that had happened, trying to figure out what she wanted. "Can I join you?" he asked from the bottom of the metal stairs. She nodded, scooting over to make room on the narrow platform. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the sounds of the town settling into evening around them. Finally, Merrick reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of red string, the kind used for friendship bracelets and craft projects. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began. "About grand gestures versus showing up consistently. About love being soup when you're sick and good luck texts before big presentations." Nadia looked at the string in his hands, her expression curious but guarded. "I used to think love was about finding someone who fit into your existing life," he continued. "Someone who complemented your success, enhanced your image, made you look good at company parties. But that's not love, that's accessorizing." "What is love then?" she asked quietly. "Love is choosing someone's happiness over your own convenience. It's being willing to change not just your schedule, but your entire definition of what matters." He held up the red string. "This isn't a diamond ring. It's not worth thousands of dollars or designed to impress anyone. It's just a promise." "What kind of promise?" "That I'll keep showing up. That I'll choose you over board meetings and stock prices and the approval of people who don't know what actually makes me happy." He looked into her eyes. "That I'll build a life worth living instead of just a career worth bragging about." Nadia's breath caught. "Merrick, I'm not asking you to marry me tonight," he said quickly. "I'm asking if you'll let me keep earning your trust. If you'll let me prove that some things are more valuable than money, more important than success, more precious than anything I could ever build or buy." She held out her wrist, and he tied the red string around it with careful, reverent fingers. The gesture was simple, almost childlike, but it felt more significant than any diamond could have been. "It's perfect," she whispered, touching the string gently. "You're perfect," he replied, leaning in to kiss her forehead. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you." As they sat together on the fire escape, Nadia's head on his shoulder and the red string bright against her wrist, Merrick reflected on how completely his definition of success had changed. 6 months ago, success meant market dominance, quarterly growth, being featured on magazine covers and invited to exclusive conferences. It meant having more money than he could spend, more influence than he could wield, more recognition than he could process. Now, success looked like this: a quiet evening with someone who loved him for who he was, not what he'd accomplished, the knowledge that he'd helped save lives during the storm, the satisfaction of fixing problems that mattered to real people, not just shareholders. "Do you ever regret it?" Nadia asked, as if reading his thoughts. "Stepping back from everything you built?" "Never," he said without hesitation. "I spent years building a company, but I forgot to build a life. I had everything I thought I wanted, and nothing that actually mattered. What matters now? This." You. The way Rena lights up when she talks about her robotics project. The way Mrs. Chen smiles when she successfully processes an online order. The way you make every person in your classes feel like they're capable of more than they believed possible. He paused, watching a shooting star streak across the sky above them. I used to measure success in dollars and market share. Now I measure it in moments like this. Quiet, real, shared with someone who makes me want to be better than I was yesterday. That's a beautiful way to think about success, Nadia said softly. It's the only way that makes sense anymore. Because at the end of your life, nobody remembers your stock price or your quarterly earnings. They remember how you made them feel, how you showed up when they needed you, whether you chose love over everything else that seemed important at the time. The red string caught the moonlight as Nadia lifted her hand to touch his cheek. I love you, she said simply. I love you too, he replied. More than I ever thought possible. And in that moment, surrounded by the quiet sounds of a small town settling into sleep, Merrick knew he'd finally found the success that mattered. Not the kind that made headlines, but the kind that made life worth living. The attack came from within, as the most devastating ones often do. Marcus Hoffman, still bitter about being passed over for the CEO position, leaked an internal memo to TechCrunch, claiming that Merrick's romantic distractions had cost the company millions in lost opportunities. The article painted him as a once sharp executive who'd gone soft, choosing small-town life over his responsibilities to shareholders and employees. The story went viral within hours. Business news channels picked it up, adding their own speculation about Merrick's midlife crisis and questioning his fitness to remain even as chairman. The company's stock price dropped 12% in a single day. Merrick was in the community center's equipment room, helping Nadia organize swim gear, when his phone started buzzing with calls from reporters, board members, and crisis management firms. You should take those, Nadia said, watching his phone light up repeatedly. No, he said firmly, turning the device face down. Whatever they want can wait. Merrick, this sounds serious. It is serious, but not more serious than this. He gestured around the room, then at her. Not more serious than us. When they finally read the article that evening, Nadia's face went pale with anger. He's making me sound like some kind of distraction, like I'm the reason you're not performing at work. You are the reason, Merrick said quietly. You're the reason I remember what actually matters. You're the reason I stopped chasing metrics that don't mean anything and started building something real. But your company will be fine. Sarah's an excellent CEO, and the fundamentals are strong. Marcus is just trying to create chaos because he's angry. Merrick took her hands. The question is, how do we respond? They'd crafted their response together, sitting at Nadia's kitchen table with cups of coffee and a shared determination to tell their story on their own terms. Not a defensive statement or a corporate press release, but a simple, honest explanation of what they'd found together. Merrick posted it on his personal blog, a platform he rarely used, with the title, What I Learned About Success from Nearly Drowning. The post went viral for all the right reasons. 3 days after the memo crisis, Rena's robotics team won first place at the regional competition. Merrick and Nadia stood in the crowded gymnasium, cheering as Rena's underwater drone successfully navigated the obstacle course and completed its pollution detection demonstration. When the judges announced the winners, Rena's face lit up with pure joy. We did it, she shouted, running toward them with her trophy held high. We're going to nationals. The celebration afterward was everything a family moment should be. Pizza in the school cafeteria, proud photos with the winning team, and Rena explaining her project to anyone who would listen. Merrick found himself in the background of most pictures, content to watch Nadia beam with pride at her sister's achievement. You know what this means? Rena said as they walked to the car, still clutching her trophy. That you're brilliant? Nadia suggested. That too, but also that I get to go to the Marine Science Institute this summer, full scholarship plus travel expenses. She grinned at Merrick. And I heard they have an internship program for high school students. Maybe I could work on real research projects. Maybe you could, Merrick agreed, already mentally noting to make some calls to colleagues in marine conservation. Later that night, as they tucked Rena into bed, a ritual she claimed to be too old for but secretly loved, she grabbed Merrick's hand. "Thank you," she said seriously. "For what?" "You did all the work. For making my sister happy. She's been different since you came around." Lighter, somehow. Rena's 13-year-old wisdom was startling. "Just don't mess it up, okay?" "I'll do my best," he promised. "Good. Because if you hurt her, I know how to build underwater drones. I can probably figure out other things too." Merrick laughed, but he didn't doubt her for a second. Summer arrived in Seabright with the kind of golden warmth that made everything feel possible. The community center's programs were thriving. Rena was preparing for nationals, and the media attention had finally shifted to other stories. Merrick had been carrying the ring for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. He'd had it custom made by a local artisan, a simple band of recycled silver inlaid with sea glass from Seabright's own beaches. It was beautiful in its simplicity, meaningful in its connection to the place where they'd found each other. The moment came on a Tuesday evening, as they walked their usual route to the lighthouse. The sun was setting in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the ocean stretched endlessly toward the horizon. "I have something to tell you," Nadia said as they reached their favorite bench. Merrick's heart skipped. "Good or bad? Good thing. Great something, actually." She turned to face him, her eyes bright with excitement. The community center got a grant, a big one, enough to expand the water safety program, hire 2 more instructors, and offer free classes to anyone who needs them. "That's incredible. How did that happen?" "Someone made an anonymous donation to the foundation that funds community programs. A very large anonymous donation." She studied his face carefully. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Merrick tried to look innocent and failed completely. "I might have made some calls." "Merrick Hale, did you just fund my entire program?" "I funded our community's program. There's a difference." She kissed him then, soft and grateful and full of love. When they broke apart, Merrick knew it was time. "I have something for you too," he said, reaching into his pocket. The ring caught the last light of the sunset, the sea glass glowing like a captured ocean. Nadia's breath caught as he dropped to one knee on the weathered wooden deck. "Nadia Reyes," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "You saved my life in more ways than one. You taught me what it means to be truly wealthy, not in money, but in love, in purpose, in the connections that make life worth living." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she was smiling. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing up for you, for Rena, for this community we've built together?" "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course. Yes." The ring fit perfectly, the sea glass catching the lighthouse beam as it swept across the water. They kissed as the stars began to appear overhead, and Merrick felt like the luckiest man alive. News of their engagement spread through Seabright faster than gossip at a church social. By the time they made it back to town, Captain's Diner was already decorated with hastily strung lights and a hand-painted banner that read, "Congratulations, Nadia and Rick." The entire community seemed to have materialized for an impromptu celebration. Boone was holding court at the counter, telling anyone who would listen about how he'd known they were perfect for each other from the beginning. Mrs. Chen had brought homemade dumplings. The teenagers from the swim team had created a playlist of romantic songs that they were playing from someone's portable speaker. "Speech, speech," someone called out, and soon the entire diner was chanting. Merrick looked around at the faces surrounding them, people who had become friends, neighbors who had become family, a community that had embraced him not because of his wealth, but because of his willingness to show up and contribute. "I'm not good at speeches," he began, and was immediately contradicted by good-natured boos. "But I want to say this. 6 months ago, I thought I had everything. success, money, recognition. But I was drowning in a life that looked good from the outside and felt empty on the inside. He found Nadia's hand and squeezed it. This woman didn't just pull me out of the ocean. She pulled me into a life worth living. She showed me that real wealth isn't what you accumulate, it's what you contribute. It's not about being the richest person in the room, it's about being the person others can count on. The diner erupted in applause, and Merrick felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the crowd and everything to do with belonging. 1 year later, the Seabright Community Center had become a model for water safety programs across the state. The expanded facility included a therapy pool for seniors, adaptive equipment for children with disabilities, and a training center where other instructors came to learn Nadia's methods. Merrick had officially moved to Seabright, converting his rental house into a permanent home and establishing a foundation focused on community-based education programs. He still served as chairman of his tech company, but his real passion was the work he did alongside Nadia, teaching, mentoring, and proving that success could be measured in lives changed rather than profits earned. On quiet mornings they could still be found at the water's edge, Nadia setting up equipment while Merrick helped students overcome their fears. The red string had long since been replaced by wedding rings, but its symbolism remained, a reminder that the most precious things in life were often the simplest. "Ready for another day of changing the world?" Nadia asked one Tuesday morning, watching their newest class of students gather nervously at the pool's edge. "With you, always," Merrick replied, and meant every word. If this story gave you chills, you need to subscribe to Rich Billionaires Romance Stories right now. We have hundreds of stories about billionaires who discover that love is the only currency that matters. Hit subscribe, ring that bell, and comment more stories if you want to see what happens when a billionaire falls for his enemy's daughter. Because what you just witnessed is proof that the best love stories aren't about fairy tale endings. They're about real beginnings. Merrick and Nadia didn't ride off into the sunset. They rolled up their sleeves and built something beautiful together, one day at a time. This is what true partnership looks like. Two people who make each other better, who choose each other's dreams alongside their own, who understand that love isn't just a feeling, it's a daily decision to show up, support, and serve something bigger than yourself. And if you're thinking this kind of love only exists in stories, think again. Every day, people are choosing connection over convenience, depth over superficiality, real wealth over material wealth. They're proving that the most valuable things in life can't be bought, they can only be built, nurtured, and shared. So subscribe to Rich Billionaires Romance Stories, because we're here to remind you that love like this is possible, that good people exist, and that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest acts of kindness. Thank you for watching Rich Billionaires Romance Stories. Remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the moments that take your breath away. See you in the next story. Friends, as we close this chapter of Merrick and Nadia's journey, remember that their story started with a single choice: to help a stranger without expecting anything in return. That one moment of selfless action created ripples that changed two lives, strengthened a community, and proved that the most powerful force in the world isn't money or influence, it's love in action. Every day, you have the opportunity to be someone's Nadia, to extend a helping hand without counting the cost, and every day, you have the chance to be someone's Merrick, to recognize the value in people who might not have much money, but have everything that truly matters. True wealth is waking up next to someone who loves you for who you are, not what you have. It's knowing that your life has meaning beyond your bank account. It's building something that will outlast you, whether that's a family, a community, or simply the memory of kindness you showed to a stranger. So until next time, keep believing in love that transforms, kindness that costs nothing but gives everything, and the beautiful truth that the best things in life are always, always free. This is Rich Billionaires Romance Stories, reminding you that you are worthy of a love story that takes your breath away. See you in the next one.